Welcome to Vibe Talks. Today, we're embarking on a really fascinating deep dive. We're looking into some pretty intriguing claims about history, calendars, and, well, the possibility that the past might be repeating. We've got some compelling material here, transcript excerpts, actually, suggesting this uncanny alignment between certain years, and it really prompts the question, could history truly be repeating itself? Or, are we maybe seeing patterns through a specific lens? Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission for this deep dive is basically to explore the details of these alleged calendar coincidences, and crucially, the significant historical events that supposedly went along with them. We want to help you understand what this, let's say, unique perspective suggests about time, and also maybe how we can critically look at such, extraordinary claims. So let's dive into the specifics. This material we're looking at, it highlights one alignment that's particularly striking. It says the 1941 calendar and the 2025 calendar are, and I quote, exactly same date, same weekends. Now, for anyone wondering how calendars can just line up like that.
Yeah, it's an interesting feature of the Gregorian calendar, the one we all use. Common years, non-leap years, they tend to repeat their day of the week pattern every 6 or 11 years, sometimes 28. Leap years repeat every 28. So mathematically, yes, 1941 and 2025 can align perfectly date for date, day for day. But the really intriguing part, the way our source presents it, is the historical parallels it draws between those aligned years.
And those parallels are really something. 1941 is described here as the 20th century's bloodiest and most tragic year. Marked by World War II, mass killing of civilians, bombing, starvation, genocide, just horrific events.
Absolutely devastating.
Exactly. And then the source contrasts that with 2025. According to this material, it points to events that have already happened in 2025. Things like the California fire, the Mahakun stampede, the Pahalgam attack, the RCB stampede, the Ahmedabad plane crash, the Iran-Israel war, and a train derailment.
Right. Quite a list.
And it explicitly notes there are still 6 months remaining in 2025.
And what's really fascinating, or maybe alarming, depending on how you view it, is the source's direct assertion here. It says, quote, "This is no coincidence." It goes on to claim we are in a time loop and that year 1941 is repeating itself, but even more dangerously this time. This just throws up a huge question for us, doesn't it?
It really does.
When the material talks about a time loop, what does that actually mean? Are we talking literal repetition, like a film reel playing again? Or is it suggesting something more like a powerful underlying cyclical pattern in history, one that influences things, maybe strongly, but doesn't absolutely dictate every single event?
Yeah, influence versus dictation. That's key.
And also, how do we even begin to evaluate such a bold claim, saying no coincidence when you're talking about complex historical events? That's a big statement.
It absolutely is. It's compelling when you see these parallels laid out like this. But, for our listeners who are thinking critically here, how do we differentiate? How do we separate what might be a genuine, maybe hidden pattern from just, the human tendency to find connections? Especially when we look back at history, there's so much data.
That is precisely the challenge. Critical thinking is essential here. Our minds are, wired to see patterns. That's how we make sense of the world. But we have to be really careful about cognitive biases. Things like confirmation bias, where you subconsciously pick out the events that fit the pattern you're looking for.
Yeah, and ignore the ones that don't fit.
Exactly. Or pareidolia, seeing meaningful patterns in random data, like seeing shapes in clouds. So a proper deep dive like this has to ask, what actual evidence does the source provide beyond just listing these parallel events? Is the selection of events comprehensive and unbiased? Or is it cherry-picked?
Good points. And this isn't presented as just a one-off thing, right? This alleged pattern doesn't stop with 1941 and 2025.
Right.
The document we're exploring draws another parallel, maybe just as compelling.
Precisely. It moves on to connect 2 other years, focusing this time on major global health crises. The material claims that the calendar for 2019, the year the COVID pandemic really took hold and tragically millions died, is also exactly same as the calendar for 1918.
And anyone familiar with 20th century history knows 1918. That was the year of the Spanish flu pandemic, which also devastatingly resulted in millions dead. So you have this striking calendar alignment again, paired with these incredibly impactful, tragic global health events. It definitely makes you pause.
It does. And if you connect the dots, like the source material encourages you to, it presents this really powerful narrative, doesn't it? A narrative of history being cyclical, tied directly to these repeating calendar patterns. It sort of pushes us beyond thinking about mere coincidence. It suggests there might be some deeper, maybe hidden structure to how time and events unfold. But yeah, there's always a but. with claims like this, we also have to think about the sheer volume of things that happen around the world every single year. Major events, minor events.
Right. Billions of data points.
Exactly. So the challenge for any claim like this isn't just showing the parallels that do fit, it's also about explaining the events that don't fit the proposed pattern. Or, more fundamentally, explaining the why. What's the actual mechanism causing this supposed cyclical recurrence? The source doesn't seem to delve into that mechanism, does it?
Not in the excerpts we have, no.
Yeah.
It states the pattern and the consequence. So, okay, if we assume for a moment these patterns are real, as the source claims, what does it suggest we can do about it? What are the implications? Because the material proposes this really grand idea. It says, if we have decoded this loop entirely, then we can not only see the future, but perhaps also change it.
And that's where it gets into some really profound territory, right? This idea fundamentally challenges our usual concepts of free will versus, destiny or determinism. The core premise is that understanding a pattern from the past isn't just academic. It could potentially allow us to see similar dangers coming and maybe, just maybe, avert future tragedies or somehow alter the outcomes.
But what would decoding the loop entirely even mean in practice?
That's the question. Does the material offer any specific methods, any keys to this decoding? Or is it presenting more of a conceptual possibility? Either way, it's a really powerful thought. The idea that knowledge of these patterns could shift us from being passive observers of history to active participants, maybe even shapers of the future.
Yeah, active intervention based on historical echoes. And if we could see these patterns unfolding, how would that actually empower people? Or societies? What's the practical takeaway here for you, the listener, beyond just finding these parallels interesting or, frankly, a bit unsettling? This idea that understanding history, not just as a linear progression, but maybe as having these repeating echoes, that it could fundamentally change how we approach the future. That's a huge proposition.
It really is.
So, this deep dive into these calendrical echoes, these historical repetitions, it certainly gives us, and hopefully you, a lot to ponder. The whole concept of a time loop, something that could potentially be decoded to foresee and maybe even change the future, that's a truly provocative thought. What if understanding these kinds of intriguing patterns, whether they're exactly as described or something else entirely, could genuinely empower us? Could it help us make different, maybe better choices about our collective future? It's definitely a thought that warrants more consideration, more critical thinking. And that was today's Vibe Talks. Keep listening, keep thinking.